What is going on, everyone? Welcome to Littleroot Lessons, episode 220. I did this in one take for the first time in about a month or so. Jay, round of applause for me.
Very impressive. Absolutely wonderful intro this time.
Yeah, that was, Carter's not here to distract me or interrupt me, so it was easy this week.
Yeah, no 7 claps in a row, no let's talk about this or that and interrupt your workflow.
Just straight into it. And this week, while we did have a regional in Santiago, that regional is smaller than the Tommy Tour that happens every Tuesday, so not a lot to really get out of it in terms of meta development. Honestly, it was more so just confirming what we already knew. And with the information that we do have, this week, Jay and I, we're going to dive back into our restricted tier list, and we're going to discuss about how we were right about some mons and how we were dipshits. So, for those of you who didn't know or didn't see our previous restricted mon tier list, now is a good time to go back to that episode just to hear our conversations about these Pokemon. I'd say really the only ones that matter are the S through B tiers, and there are a few interesting C tier mons as well, but it's really these 10 up here that are the top.
Yeah, I don't think we did a terrible job on the original tier list, to be fair to us. There's definitely some movement for us to definitely look at. Some Pokemon that are achieving more than we assumed, some Pokemon that are achieving less, but I think for the most part, we did okay.
Yeah. There are a few things that I'd like to adjust, and I think a lot of it, do you want to just jump into the two biggest winners of the regulation so far that I think everyone was wrong about?
Yeah. Zamazenta and Miraidon.
These are A-tier Pokemon.
Easily.
Yeah, like just going by event-wise, not to say that Santiago didn't matter. Santiago Regionals was a Zamazenta Finals. 3 of the top 4 teams were Zam. Zam won in Stockholm in a very impressive manner, and it did have a top 8 at Indianapolis, which of course Indianapolis was won by Miraidon, which has still stuck around. The team that both Rajan and Dr. Aaron Trailer went and ran, people have already adapted to it. I know the adaptation that Hush, Chris, and I made. Chris just used that to win a PC down in the Philly area about an hour ago. So this Mon's winning events. It's still really good. And if you're planning on events, honestly, give these 2 Pokemon a try. They're so fun if you haven't used them yet.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting the way that each of these Pokemon interact with specifically Amoonguss. Now, one of them is like a great answer to what Amoonguss is doing, but also doesn't, outside of Draco Meteor, doesn't really hit it with what it wants to like be clicking most of the time. And like Zamazenta really struggles into the Amoonguss matchup a lot of the time, so its teammates are really doing the supportive job on it. But yeah, both of these Pokemon, they have a very like wide set of tools that are all really strong. Miraidon, you're most of the time going to be seeing that Terra Electric Choice Spec set. That's just going to be clicking Electro Drift and Discharge and Volt Switch all over the place, and is really annoying to deal with. Very positional based, but extremely strong. And Zamazenta, between Heavy Slam, Body Press, Iron Defense, Wide Guard, it also has its neat bag of tricks that really does a lot into the format.
Yeah, I think what you were saying with the Amoonguss, Zamazenta really just needs to be Terra Grass, and if you want Terra Grass, then you're going to be in a situation where you will pretty much lose to Amoonguss. But that's also why we've seen in the past, like the team that won in Stockholm, you had Pelipper, Chien, Chien-Pao, Latios, and Moltres. Which the Moltres, while it didn't carry, the Moltres wasn't carrying any flying coverage, but like you have 3 to 4 Pokemon that are like anti-grass Pokemon on top of the Terra Grass. More recently, people are again like Goggles instant with Taunt. is another way to help along with the Terra Grass, to make sure that the Zamazenta isn't losing to Amoonguss, which just never goes away.
Yeah, and of course, they have the Pelipers on that team that are really helpful as well into, clicking Hurricane into Amoonguss and, being a little bit of a delete button at times. I don't think you pick up the KO on most occasions, but...
I think it depends. I think more so on the Amoonguss. It's close.
Yeah.
I can just...
I'll put a little bit more respect on Pelly's name this week.
Yeah, okay.
Carter's not here to talk me down. So.
Last week, I was told it was a gas leak episode, and you also, the fact that you went so in on the hate of a Pokemon that...
Okay, but I did preface it by saying I'm pretty neutral on it, but I do think that it stinks. I don't hate it, I don't like it, but I think that overall, like, it's like cool so ability focused. It's mainly to protect your Zom against the fire types, like the Chi-Yus specifically.
Be a ground type switch, be a switch in on the ground and fighting type attacks as well. Yeah,
like its offensive and defensive prowess is not great. Its typing is like all over the place, especially when like Raging Bolt is kind of everywhere.
Yeah.
It's got a lot of problems, but it works really, really well on this team, and that's kind of like goes back to a lot of what we've been talking about with this format, is that when you play a restricted format, especially a single restricted format, Pokemon that specifically help your restricted Pokemon in certain matchups that it struggles with become really essential. They become, very highly used, as we've seen with Pelipper, who was nowhere to be found, outside of like Arch Raiden teams for quite some time.
Yeah.
And even then you could use Tornadus over it. Now it has that additional boost of, hey, I have Wide Guard, I have Instant Rain, I have these really great tools that help Pokemon like Zamazenta and Cali-Ice succeed, and even Zacian to a lesser extent, see them succeed in this like very high powered, very matchup oriented format.
I think the other thing that helps is that the attacks it is clicking are high base power attacks. Weather Ball in the weather boosts up to 100 base power, so it's a 100 base power stab move that you can delete Incineroar with. And then Hurricane is a base 110, never misses, 30% chance of confusion. So while the actual stats aren't as good, the base power of like the damage it's able to put out by the base power of the attacks that are very, very consistent with it helps mitigate that. But enough about my favorite bird. Let's talk about a Pokemon that actually you can pick the next one to talk about on our re-tiering.
We can talk about the horse in the room, I guess, and that would be Calyrex Shadow. We had it as a very strong S tier in our original rankings. Now I think that just given the results, given the way that the meta is formed, some of its major issues that are very prominent, like Incineroar, Ursaluna Blood Moon, Terapagos, just to name a few, this Pokemon definitely has a much harder time than I think most of us originally assumed. We saw it kind of taking names at the very beginning of the format, and now it's, really fallen off, hasn't made a top 8 in, God knows how long at this point.
They did. I think there were 2 that topped 8 today at Santiago, and they were immediately knocked out.
Well, good on them for getting that far, honestly.
Yeah. But again, it's like Santiago, like that was an 8-round top 8. Like it was pretty much a COVID regional. So not what we're used to anymore. So I assume that there are a few Calyrex Shadow players that could go 6-2 or 7-1 and sneak in on decent resistance, but not go through a gauntlet of a full day 2 to get there.
Yeah, it's been a tough go for Cali-S, and I don't think that it necessarily falls below A tier, because you need to respect this Pokemon. You need to have your answers. The reason why it's struggling so much is because most teams have 2 to 3, sometimes even 4 answers for specifically this mon. But I think that it's a matter of time before we see adaptation on the teams that are built around it to cover its weaknesses better. Maybe be a little bit less. I don't want to like sound like mean when I'm saying this, but a little less brain dead in the way that it's kind of built, to where it's click buttony and just, oh, I'm gonna click Astral Barrage and expanding force and such, over and over and over and over again. I think that it needs to be played a lot more masterfully, have some cool unique adaptations. One that I really liked was Moxie boosted, ended up day 2ing Indie with it was Nasty Plot, Draining Kiss Leftovers, Cali Shadow. And that was pretty interesting. That was a pretty awesome set for it. But I do think that it's the supporting cast around it needs to change quite a bit. I think that it needs some new options and some new ideas to really step up. I don't think we'll see it up in the S tier again this format.
Next format, definitely.
Yeah, when we get to GS Cup, this thing is going to be an absolute menace. But as for right now, unfortunately, we were pretty incorrect.
I think part of it is the what you said. I think is very true. Everyone is so prepped for this. I think the best way I can explain Calyrex Shadow, you're either going to go into a matchup and your opponent has no matchup, and you go herd or click button, and after 2 Astral Barrages, you win. Or you're going to go into a matchup, and we saw it a few times on stream, whether it was in Indy or in Stockholm, where the Calyrex Shadow players looking at the opponent's team, it's like, okay, well, they have a Blood Moon, they have an Ensign with an Assault Vest, they have a Farigiraf with Foul Play. Wow, I can't bring my restricted Pokemon. And now I'm playing 5v4, and 5v6, and the one I'm not bringing is the best Pokemon on the team. So that's the really tough part about it. And in these single restricted formats, it is a lot of matchup roulette. I think one of the reasons why Zamazenta is so good is because it gets the good matchup into Calyrex Ice and into Terapagos, where if Cali Ice and Terapagos, maybe they were able to fit on another restricted, like you could do like Cali Eye Groudon, and now you have the ground type threatening the steel type, you can play that mix and match. You really can't do that anymore, which is making things a little difficult for Calyrex Shadow specifically, who would love to have a Pokemon like Koraidon or even Zamazenta next to it to threaten all of these normal and dark types that are giving it this massive issue.
Yeah.
As for the other horse, and this is something I've spent like 2 hours in the car today while Amanda and her friend were sitting and reading. I was like listening to music, thinking, is Calyrex Ice an S tier Pokemon, or do we not have an S tier in this format?
So I went before this recording today, and I just threw together my quick little restricted list on my own, just like what I was thinking of. And I personally am leaning towards no.
Okay, that's where I leaned as well, and confirmation bias. While bad is great for co-hosts because that means that it's nice to be on the same page sometimes. I think Calyrex Ice is as good as we expected it to be. I think what's really interesting is that it's not the hard Trick Room teams or even like a Tail Room. It's these balanced teams that they lean trick Room, but it's the Amoonguss Ensign water type. You could have the rain mode with like an Ursh Pelipper. A lot of people, they'll use a Pokemon like Goldango and Raging Bolt to patch up matchups into other Pokemon that they struggle with. Goldango for the Zamazenta, Raging Bolt for the Kyogre. And I think that is a super interesting way to play them on, because between like the Calyrex Ice, the Zamazenta, we're seeing more of while we have these super offensive teams, we're already starting to see the modes of balance that are able to appear in this metagame.
Yeah, for sure. I think with Cali Ice, it's specifically hard to put this into the S tier because, like, in terms of usage stats, it's really been floating around the same as Zamazenta. It had one tournament where it was massive, one tournament where it fell off a little bit, and Zamazenta kind of stepped up. But Zamazenta has multiple regional crowns now at this point, right? So if we're not putting that in S tier, I feel it's a little hard pressed to put Cali I up there. I think the thing with Cali I specifically in terms of matchups is that it plays this weird little game with its speed tiers to where it's not fast enough to really work outside of Trick Room, but it also, although it is slow enough to work inside of Trick Room, Amoonguss is a really big issue for it. Yeah. We do see a lot of Terra Grass on it, but that means that you're running, a Terra that's the same weakness to your original base typing. And one Pokemon that's really, really tough for this to go up against is Chi. It's just a tough matchup, and we saw it in Stockholm with Marco Fierro, where he got stuck not being able to click Trick Room because of the impending Amoonguss in the back. Kind of got stuck out on the field, not really being able to do anything, and then it's a tough balancing act for Cali right now.
It does have some. It can end up the end game you're trying to get to, where you have your Calyrex in the proper speed control, and you're clicking Glacial Lance. It's very difficult for it to get into that point, especially when you have something like the Specs Miraidon, the resurgence of Chi-Yu with the Miraidon and with the Terapagos. And to quote Dr. Aaron Trailer in the write-up that he did on his Indianapolis team, to quote, he's like, I don't want to play a balanced team where someone's Blorbo hits like Hyper Blast and just demolishes my balance piece 7 turns in, and now I can't switch it all and I get swept. Yeah. Like, and that is why he ended up using the Blorbo in Specs Miraidon. Yeah. And he's like, if stuff's going to get blown up, I'm doing the blowing up. But that is probably why, along with Terapagos, Calyrex Ice has been the bridesmaid at a lot of these tournaments and never the bride.
Yeah, we saw exactly what Dr. Aaron Trailer was talking about in that situation in that top 4 match with Marco Fierro, is that he lost his Raging Bolt piece immediately turn 1 game 3.
Yep.
And had nowhere to go after that. Got pinned in between the speed tiers, not being able to set Trick Room for himself, because there was an Amoonguss on the other side, not being able to outspeed anything on the opposing side as well. You can't Terra in front of Terapagos because then you're just Terra Stellar food kind of. I think that it's really tough matchups. It's obviously incredibly strong. It is extremely bulky, has really good movesets between Glacial Lance and High Horsepower. You're really covering a lot of your weaknesses. But I do think that it's not like the S tier strength that we originally thought Calyrex Shadow to be, to where it's like, this thing's going to be everywhere. This thing has great matchups across the board, especially with Zamazenta now being a thing. Like,
yeah,
it really struggles in that matchup. That's a very tough matchup overall for it. So,
yeah, I mean, I was saying about a month and a half, like a month before the format was even officially announced, that this was my pick to win Indy, and I think everyone probably would have picked it up until the week of, when we saw, hey, maybe there's a few other options. But even then, it's like, it was the number 1 use restricted on day 1 of Indy. It just had a bad conversion rate, and I think when you have such a massive target put onto your back, people are going to be building against you. And with that being built against you, we have another Psychic Ghost restricted Pokemon. Earlier in the format, I said that I feel like one of these restricteds that I really like is going to be the next Latias Balance. Initially, I thought it was going to be Terapagos, but Lunala, it's you, buddy. Lunala is at the bottom of the day one tier list for usage list for restricted on these tournaments. Maybe one of them sneaks in. I actually don't even think one snuck in at Stockholm. It's just worse Calyrex Shadow, and it runs into the same issues, but it's even worse, where you'll have a matchup where they'll have 2 to 3 normal and dark types, and you can't do anything. But even the matchups where you can do things, you don't have a move like Astral Barrage or an ability like As One with the Grimnay and a Nerve combo. So even in the matchups where you can bring your Lunala, it's not doing the thing as well as the Calyrex. And as of right now, I have to say, I don't suggest bringing Lunala to a regional, or if you're trying to go to a big-time PC, big-time MSS to close out that Worlds invite. I don't think Lunala is the call for you if you're really gunning and you're saying to yourself, I really need points. And this Big 10 we thought we had is actually a Big 9.
I don't disagree with your take here, and I don't disagree with the placement, but I do think that Lunala is actually very interesting because I just don't think its moveset has evolved to the point to where it has to be yet. Like, you're basically always going to be running Moongeist Beam, Meteor Beam, Wide Guard, and Trick Room, but I think that this thing has a much deeper move pool than something like Calyrex Shadow does. You have options like Moonblast. You have, which does some decent damage into specific Pokemon that you might struggle with outside of, that Calyrex Shadow can't really deal with. I have some trust in Lunala, but it's been weird because we've seen some in some of these online tours recently. Necrozma Dawnwings is actually doing better than Lunala is in some of these tours. Like, it has some results.
I think it's the damage. I haven't really dove into those Necrozma Dawnwings teams. I know that it's been brought up in like some of my building groups. People are like, oh, I'm interested in this, and no one's ever really dove into it. I think what could be interesting, again, having the stronger Fairy type attack and Moonblast, they hit those dark types of school. Specifically with Lunala, the people, at least early in the format, I saw have more success with it. Wasn't with the Power or Meteor Beam set, but it was actually with just a simple Protect, Calm Mind, Moongeist Beam coverage move. And setting up a couple of these Calm Minds, which is pretty much you're doing the Calm Mind Terapagos that doesn't lose to fighting types. So that was an interesting take on it, and maybe that is something that people can go on. But as of right now, it seems like you want your special offensive restricteds to have immediate offense. You don't want that setup turn, which is why even though in Santiago today we did see 2 Calm Mind Terapagos cut over the Specs ones, the Specs Terapagos have been the ones that have gotten the results. The Miraidon has Specs, and the Kyogre is Kyogre and Calyrex, while they don't need the Specs because they have their moves are just immediately powerful. They also aren't having, again, as great of a time as these two over here.
Yeah.
While running Specs Lunala, you don't have that spread damage. You aren't getting as much out of the Specs as you would with any of these Pokemon up here if you went with Specs there.
Another thing about Lunala, too, that I think really was kind of a big issue for it is that this format has so much priority in it that and so much that outspeeds it as well, that Shadow Shield is kind of like not having an ability sometimes. Like, you're going to get Thunderclapped and Grassy Glided and, just be
Sucker Punched
and be outsped by so many things that you kind of lose that ability right away. And that's, I think, one another reason why Necrozma Dawnwings has been succeeding is that Prism Armor's always there to improve and patch up matchups, improve your bulk against super effective attacks. Typing wise, this thing also struggles quite a bit. Like being weak to 4 times weak to Dark and Ghost is not fantastic, especially when Incineroar is on 70% of teams.
Yeah.
You really can't take a knockoff, and it's tough. It's a tough position.
I know this isn't like a super common thing. I just wanted to look. A Jolly Stellar Terra Chimpow has a 50% chance of OHKOing Lunala with a Sucker Punch through the Shadow Shield.
Yeah.
So and that's Jolly, and if you're adamant, it's 100% through the Shadow Shield.
Yeah, and even if you're not Stellar Terra, you're still clicking this thing early for 80-90% damage.
It would be 75 to 88% for adamant, and then if you're Jolly, it's 69 to 81. So, and yeah, they could Meteor Beam you, cool, but
knock you to Sash, whatever.
Knock you to Sash, and then I click Sucker Punch again the next turn.
Yeah, but then you're also just leaving yourself vulnerable to a follow-up attack from any neutral attack at that point is probably gonna be able to pick up, because this format has so much offense. There's so much power that even these support mons have a lot of investment or really strong attacks. I don't know. It's a weird spot for Lunala for sure right now. I think that I'm not surprised to see it struggling, but it's one of those mons that maybe we'll see creep up a little bit when people start recognizing some other options with it. But I think that it will be back GS Cup as well in strong force.
No, this is definitely, and going into the format, I thought at first this is a GS Cup mon, and then it had some super early results, but similar to the Latias balance team, just once we got to big boy time, fell off. We will be seeing this again. This will be a great partner with Groudon, with Koraidon. The usual spot. It loves being in Sun, and now it has 2 Sunsetters that it can really partner with and promote. Speaking of the Sunsetters, I think I'm willing to move Koraidon down to B tier.
I am also willing to move Koraidon down to B tier. I think that this has been a little disappointing.
Yeah, you've used the Pokemon more than me, and again, we do know of people winning with it. One of our community members, Gucci, she just won her first MSS using a Koraidon Sun team with Walking Wake that she's been working on for what seems to be, I think, the entire format at this point.
Yeah,
but we aren't seeing the results in the majors. I don't think it's cut any of the events yet.
It did with Luca Triggett in Indy, I think.
Oh.
Or did he just bubble cut? He might have just bubble cut.
I think Luca bubbled.
But yeah, I think that this Pokemon it's not something that you can sleep on just yet. I think that in terms of matchups, it has some pretty decent matchups across the board, whether it be the Kali-I, the Zamazenta are not bad matchups for it necessarily. Terapagos is a decent matchup for it.
Yeah.
It just hasn't had the results so far, and I think that it's because I don't know.
So my take on it is it's similar to Miraidon, where it's not a Pokemon issue, it's a team building issue, and people haven't figured out the optimal way to play it. Recently, the most common way it's been ran is with Flutter and Raging Bolt. It's either Flutter and one of the 2 dragons, Raging Bolt or Walking Wake. And then you throw in Incin, Amoonguss, and usually Tornadus for Tailwind. That's how it's been mostly. And on paper, being a fighting type that sets Sun is amazing when you have Zama and Terapagos, and it's again also amazing into the Calyrex Ice. It's just that I don't think the pieces around it are fully optimized in that sense. Someone's going to figure out a really good Sun team, and we're all going to be like, what were we doing? The same way that Rajan and Dr. Aaron Trailer. Aaron's going to hate me if he ever listens to this with the amount of times I call him that.
Hey, he's gonna love you. To be fair, if I had a doctorate, I would also want everyone to call me doctor at all points. So
in the Rhode Island VGC group chat, all of us, when he went on stream and was like doing well and everything in indie, it was just a wall of everyone just putting Dr. Aaron Trailer, Dr. Aaron Trailer.
Hey, I would take it in a heartbeat. But when it comes to Koraidon,
yes, back to Koraidon.
Like, so I used this very early format, and I used it for quite some time. I really enjoyed it, but I used it in a very different way than what we're seeing. I actually was running an Assault Vest set on it.
With U-turn.
With U-turn, yeah. And I think that is maybe something that people can think about a little bit more. I did run it next to King Gambit as a way to, like, kind of disincentivize Incineroar stuff. But it helps your longevity into some of these matchups that might be a little difficult, like Miraidon, like Terapagos, like Kali Shadow, just to name a few. And I don't know. It feels like a Pokemon that should be succeeding at a very high level. I think that it's maybe its lack of spread moves. It doesn't run a lot of type coverage anymore either. Like, people have been dropping Dragon Claw on it.
A lot of people do like Flame Charge or something.
Yeah, Flame Charge plus Flare Blitz. I think we could see the rise of that as well. Because you just one-shot Pokemon like Raging Bolt with that, which you don't do normally.
Yeah.
You force Terra on Miraidon that way as well, which, it doesn't really want to, like, its electric type moves aren't doing a ton to you in its base, it's in your base typing, and obviously it's Draco Meteor, but there's ways to play around it with, like, your Flutter Mains. I don't know. I think that, like you said, it's a team building problem with Koraidon more than anything. I think that these walking weight teams have been really interesting. It's also its speed tier. It's very awkward to play in this format where you're speed tying like everything.
Yeah, when you're speed tying Xian, Flutter, and Miraidon, and all three of those Pokemon have delete buttons against you, whether it's Draco Meteor, Ice Spin or Icicle Crash, or Moonblast. And I know one thing is that a lot of them are Miraidon right now, they are running Modest, so if you're running, and I was just talking about Adamant Jolly on the Genpao, so maybe there's points where if you're running Jolly, you at least know, okay, I'm going to outrun the Modest Miraidon, I'm going to outrun the Adamant Genpao, but you're never outspeeding Flutter, because you're going, the only way you're outspeeding Flutter is if they're getting a special attack boost, not a speed boost, with the photosynthesis, because your Sun is always going to give the opposing Flutter main that photosynthesis boost. And so maybe that's the other thing where, arguably, Koraidon's best partner in Flutter main is also its worst enemy. And that is an awkward place to be. The other thing in general with these physical restricted Pokemon, and this goes for pretty much everyone besides Zacian, Zamazenta, and Solgaleo, because they either have to hold an item or they have an ability that blocks Intimidate. Instant's so prevalent that it's at 70%, and that's with every Kali Ice running Clear Amulet, and pretty much every Groudon running Clear Amulet. And I feel like Koraidon as well, you want the Assault Vest for the bulk and to take advantage of your move pool, but you also don't want to just be intimidate, fake out parting shot fodder for each, like, so it's like that point where you want your bulk, but you also want to actually do the thing, and you can't get both.
Yeah.
So that's probably why I'd say it's B tier right now. I'd say the only other, I think Groudon and Zacian are fine in B tier. I think, in my opinion, they're clearly better than everything else in this C tier. However, however, it's like we haven't gotten the result. And again, I feel like outside of Cali I, with the uprise in Zamazenta and the uprise in Miraidon, you'd think that the ground type would really, really help in a format where there's no ground type coverage, and it just can't get it can't get itself together in order to take advantage of a metagame that hypothetically is really, really good for it.
Yeah, I think you're just it's just so inconsistent in terms of its moves. Like,
yeah, I just missed another P-Blades. Actually,
yeah.
Talking of that, I was the Balance Patch MSS is currently happening in Boston as we're recording. And right before we hopped on, I was able to catch was Sohaib versus Stefan Mott. Sohaib was running a Zacian team, and Stefan is running a Helping Hands Groudon team, because Groudon has Helping Hands right now. See the little claws right there? And in game 3, Stefan was able to win the set, but in game 3 he had back-to-back P-Blades misses on the Zacian. So he was able to win the set. He would have won it about 4 turns earlier if the Groudon decided to hit even one of them, let alone missing 2.
Yeah.
And that is, well, first of all, that's like to show the skill level of a player like Stefan Mott, that through 2 misses, he's like, I got this matchup, I know what I'm doing, and I can win this game 3 through that. But on the other hand, if he lost that set, I'm 99% sure the first thing we could have pointed out to is, yeah, you missed back-to-back P-Blades.
Yeah, and especially when you're missing on specific targets, sometimes you're like, oh, I really need you to hit this target, and then you miss that one, you hit the other one, you're like, oh, no, that doesn't help me at all.
Yeah. You can't control who you hit and who you miss, and that is one of the things with these formats, even in Indie. We saw Chi-Yu didn't want to hit its overheat, and it didn't want to hit its heat wave in finals. It went on a workers' strike.
Yeah, same in Stockholm. Also, yeah. I just think like that's also been another reason why we've seen this big fall on Tornadus. You're missing Bleak Windstorms too often. It's just inconsistency is not good for 14-round days. I can speak from experience on this. I used Groudon in my first ever tournament in Secaucus in the GS Cup format with Reshiram. And I missed too many P-Blades, I missed too many Venusaur Sleep Powders. Like, that is not made for these long tournaments, because you are going to miss a ton of them at very important moments. It's tough, because I think a lot of people early on were very high on Groudon, and I still think that if you get good matchups and good luck, Groudon, the sky is the limit for this Pokemon. Like, it has the tools, it has the power. The bulk up sets are really tough to deal with. To make it up and do well, make a top 8, potentially go on to win a tournament. But there's just so much inconsistency that makes the whole entire day 1, day 2 format really, really tough for this mod.
Yeah, the number of times you're exposed to the risk of having to click P-Blades, at some point, like, it is a law of large numbers, where most of the time they are going to hit. It is 85%, and that means that 85% of the time it's good, but that 15% is going to pop up more often than you really want it to, and especially the more you have to click it, the more you expose yourself. If it had a more consistent ground type attack, like, even if it had access to high horsepower, I think people would run, instead of coverage, they would run double ground on Groudon. Because P-Blades is too good to not run. You have to run it. if you're not running P-Blades on your Groudon, then you shouldn't even use the Pokemon. If you use Koraidon if you want to do a Sun team, and you don't want P-Blades.
You know it does get high horsepower?
What gets high horsepower?
Groudon.
Wait, it does get high horsepower?
It gets that,
Since
and
when?
it gets Stomping Tantrum.
Since what? Is that new?
It must have been, because I just looked it up now, and it is certainly legal.
Never mind. Okay, so Tantrum Groudon, screw it, go double ground.
Yeah, I'm waiting for us to see like Earthquake next to Bronzong type stuff again.
So I did think of that because Bronzong is an amazing partner for Groudon. I wasn't thinking of it for initially. My thought wasn't even the Levitate. I was thinking Gravity, because now you can't miss your P-Blades.
Yeah, well, Carl said that was trash. So
yes, so Carl was our guinea pig, and he said no. But we did see, I know Joe UX9 at last week's Tommy Tour I think he finished 10th with Groudon and Bronzong. And Bronzong is a Pokemon that actually has a really great matchup spread right now. You have the if you're going with the Iron Defense Body Press with Levitate, you have a great spread into opposing Groudon. Defensively, you're really good into the Zamazenta and the Zacian. And offensively with that body, and you're also defensively great into Calyrex Ice, and the body press, you're able to really threaten not only the steel types and the Cali-I, but you're also able to get the Terapagos. If the Terapagos gets out of position, you're able to bop it with a +2 body press, and it's going down. So I'd say that's another case of a Mon that we really haven't seen, and that could be the next meta development. One thing to note just in general with a lot of these Pokemon, I'd say specifically with Calyrex Shadow, is that if you're planning, you have people, they aren't going to LA, but they are going to NAIC. Maybe they're keeping that really, really powerful Cali S team in the back pocket to make sure that they have a really, really strong finish to the format at NAIC, trying to lock in a Worlds invite or something. So maybe there's a few of these techs that we're talking about now that when we do our NAIC recap, we're like, wow, these are things that we were like, oh, that would be cool. And then they are cool and they do well. Or we're wrong. Who knows? Who can say? The last restricted Pokemon we haven't talked about in the Big Nine is Kyogre. We currently have it in A tier. It did get two cup finishes in Indianapolis. To be quite honest, I was super afraid of it winning after you and I kept on calling it a fraud restricted and not great. It's a good Mon. It's better than what we gave it credit for.
I think in our tier list we gave it respect.
We gave it respect in the tier list. Outside of the tier list and every other time we've talked about it, we've trashed that fish.
Yeah, and I think that Terra has been a positive for it. Being able to Terra Grass and get rid of, your big priority weaknesses, and Thunderclap and Grassy Glide are really great for Water Spout spam. Water Spout is still an incredibly powerful move. In Rain, 150 base power. You run it next to Tornadus, you run it next to Jugulis. It has some really awesome teams. I like the Assault Vest variations that we saw that give you a lot more counterplay into, a variety of Pokemon that I believe Shyline Tang and I can't remember who the other Kyogre player was with that AV Iron Jug team. But I think that that's a great development for it. I know we've seen things like Choice Scarf, we've seen things like Choice Specs.
Mystic Water is always a classic with
Mystic Water. But adding that bulk makes it really, really great, and having a nice defensive Terra, some good options, allows you to play into different matchups better. It's very strong, and I do think that there's a lot of counterplay to it. Running around in the format, Wide Guard is really rough for it. Pokemon like Zamazenta with the Wide Guard makes for an incredibly difficult matchup into really the majority of it, what it's running next to it. Because the Jugulis and Tornadus don't touch it. The Serena, the Farigiraf don't really, they struggle to really hit the Zamazenta. I think that Kyogre is in a steady place right now, but I think that it's going to, we've been talking about matchup roulette the whole time, but it is one of the more dependent on matchup roulette, I think, out of a lot of the restricted Pokemon in this format.
One of the tough things with Kyogre, with the rise of the wide guard, whether it's on opposing Pelipper's, the Samazentas, that for the Samazenta teams that run wide guard, is that Kyogre. Actually, I'm gonna check something before I do this again. I'm going to confirm if Kyogre still has a move.
So. Scald? It does not have Scald.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Kyogre I'll tell you right now.
Yeah, thank you. I thought it did, and then I was wrong about the whole Groudon thing. Yeah. So, so Kyogre lost Scald, and it also lost the ability to Dynamax, which means that its two biggest single target moves for Stab are now gone. You have to run Hydro Pump, which we called it Hydro Mist for a year on Bundle, but people were running Encore. They were doing like Specs, triple ice, and everything. They were trying to do everything they can on their bundles to not click Hydro Pump. So why are you going to add Hydro Pump on your Kyogre? But that just all that means is that your two stab moves are walled out by the wide guard, and now you're forced to click Thunder into a Zamazenta or Ice Beam into a Zamazenta, and that you're now hitting moves that are weather dependent, that aren't very effective, and you're just the amount of damage you're able to put out with your restricted Pokemon is immediately mitigated while they're going either clicking wide guard or winning the wide guard mind games, and you think they're going to wide guard, you Ice Beam into them, you miss the freeze, and now you just took a body press, and 68% of your HP is gone.
Yeah. Another thing that I think Kyogre struggles with is that there is a lot of Trick Room in the format right now. A lot of Kyogres want to be so fast because you want to click your Water Spout, you want to get your Tailwinds up. But Farigiraf is on like 25% of teams right now. Kali-I is all over the place. There is a lot of Trick Room options in this format to where you can say, I'm going to flip the dimensions on you if you want to set Tailwind. I'm going to, start doing damage to you, take away some of your bigger damaging options, get you into a bad place early, and have you struggle with that. And then on top of that, its speed tier is just very awkward to where if you don't want to bring your Tailwind mode, you're underspeeding Miraidon, you're underspeeding Zamazenta, you're underspeeding Kali Shadow, Koraidon, Zacian. It's in a weird place. I still think that it's really, really strong, but it's definitely not to the Sword and Shield, standards that we saw it at.
Yeah, I think the other thing, just like looking at it, so you do outspeed the Terapagos, which is good. Assuming you're both modest, you will lose to timid Terapagos if you're modest on the Kyogre. But like the Zamazenta and the Miraidon, those are also Pokemon that will pack specifically the Miraidon, they will pack a Trick Room mode, not Trick Room, a Tailwind mode, and now you're matching Tailwinds, and it's a wash. The speed doesn't really matter. The Zamazenta, at least the ones that we saw recently, weren't using a Tailwind mode. It's just a strict balance. I'm going to out-pivot, out-position, and out-bulk you. But the teams that we did see, the team that we saw win Stockholm, did feature the Tailwind on. It did feature the Tailwind on the Moltres G, so they have the option to say let's match the pace of the game, in that sense. So yeah, it is the most awkward thing. I believe one of our community members asked, it's like, why haven't people really worked with Trick Room and Kyogre to try to like outpace the Tailwind? And I think the main reason why is because it is just generally more you do have to commit a little more to set up Trick Room than you do to set up Tailwind. I think that's why Calyrex Ice is so good right now, is because it is its own speed control, or at least it can be its own speed control. And it's not slow enough to take advantage of it, as well as some of these other Pokemon can.
Yeah, you're missing out on clicking your strongest move. You want to be clicking Water Spout first. And you can't do that when you're setting up Trick Room in your base 90 speed. There's too much that's slower than you. There's too much that can attack you before you even get your opportunity. The ice cream truck is back.
I want ice cream so bad.
Yeah, same. Unfortunate.
Yeah.
But yeah. I
There,
have two Pokemon that I want to talk about before we head out of here.
I was
One
just
that
about to
I'm
ask.
like middlingly passionate about, and one that I am very passionate about.
Let's go with let's go with middling first, and then we're going to go finish this off with the bang. So middling passion.
Eternatus. I think that Eternatus is pretty good. I think that it's high C, low B. We've seen some results, not in the major tournaments, but in some of the limitless stuff. It did win our Littleroot Rumble, our Littleroot Invitational event. It has really good defensive typing. It has really good base stats. It has a very wide move pool that allows it to hit into a lot of very strong options from a lot of different teams. I know we talked about the Stall Eternatus last week. I am not very passionate about Stall Eternatus personally.
Thank God.
I had a great time talking about that team, and it was awesome. It was so cool. When I see Stall do well, I'm like, yo, this is the sickest thing ever. But in terms of consistency, I think that like Sludge Bomb, Meteor Beam, Flamethrower, Dynamax Cannon are a really, really great 4-move choice like options that you can run on this thing and see some success with it. I think that it has a great speed tier, some really decent matchups. Not the best matchups in the world, but it works well into like Kyogre. With Terra, you can do some stuff into the Kali Eye. With Flamethrower, you definitely threaten things like Zamazenta. I think that there is a place for Eternatus. I don't think that it's necessarily going to be up in that top 9, up in that top 10 a lot of the time. But I wouldn't be surprised to see it do really well, to make a cut, to bubble a cut, to on a specific team.
Yeah, I think another option is that it does have a really great special attack stat at 145, base 130 speed, and 140, 95, 95 defenses are really strong. I think this is another Pokemon that could be a great candidate for choice specs, along with the other specs dragon types, to just put that immediate damage pressure out. I think, again, the big thing holding it back from doing that is your best is for all these specs mons, namely the Miraidon and the Terapagos, they have a spread move that they're able to take advantage of. Your spread move on the Eternatus is Sludge Wave. And now you're forced to run steel types next to you, and you're doubling down on that ground weakness, and everything, or you're saying I need to go protect, and you're just not getting as much out of it in that sense. I do agree with you. The offensive output and the offensive potential of this Pokemon is really, really great. It's just getting the right duo together. Maybe it goes well with one of its for GS Cup to do that, like specs Sludge Wave spam. You pair it with one of its fellow Gen 8 restricted mons in Zamazenta or Zacian. I think you are doubling down on your ground type weakness in doing so, but those could be options that you look at in that sense. Honestly, with Zacian plus Eternatus, you get the 2-mon fantasy core, Zacian's Steel and Fairy, and then the Dragon type from Eternatus. So that could be interesting, even defensively, the way that the two of them can support each other in that sense.
Yeah.
So I'm not like out on it. I do think it is a C tier mon, but again, NAIC, I could actually, no, want me to tell you what I see? I could see, like, someone like Jamie Boyd going and, like, day 2ing Worlds with this, and everyone, it's going to be, like, this and, like, a Superior and a freaking, like a Fluffle or something. Like, it's just crazy Pokemon, and it's, like, a Gloom's there, and a Dugong. We're not talking about that.
Oh my gosh, yeah, no, you brought us down this path, okay?
And I'm stopping us. But yeah, it's going to be, like, yeah, like, someone like a Jamie Boyd or David Kutesh, if he's going to Worlds this year, where everyone's staring at the screen like, what the hell did we just watch? And it's going to only be for Worlds, and every single person who tries to recreate it is going to suck with it, because only they can run their own teams.
Yeah. I do like Eternatus, though. I think that it's interesting selection right now. I think GS Cup, come that time, I think that this Pokemon is going to be much better. I don't see it as, above the C tier right now, but I do like it. I'm also an Eternatus stan myself. I used it for all of Series 10 and was very happy with it, so...
I can't believe it. I already know. It took me a minute, and I looked at the screen, and I'm like, oh yeah, I know the Pokemon that you're going to be talking about.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Jay's certified sleeper pick of the week, baby. Let's post it. Put it on the advertisement. Right.
Are you going to call it
Origin Form Dialga?
It's going to cut.
Let's talk about it.
Are you going to put your foot in the stake in the ground and say it's going to cut LA this weekend?
No. No, because everyone is asleep, man. No one is awake. No one's seeing the vision. Okay,
talk me through the vision.
The vision of this is that, typing wise, it has some really great matchups. Steel Dragon leaves you with neutralities to Calyrex Ice, to Draco Meteor from Miraidon, and a resist to Electro Drift. You resist Terapagos outside of Terra Stellar. You resist Kyogre. It's not an amazing matchup into Groudon, but you have Terra to work around that. I've been running Terra Fairy on it. I think that it has 20 extra special defense, which is a really big buff for it. Yeah. 150 special attack is nothing to scoff at, and you have the Adamant Crystal, which then boosts your Steel and Dragon type moves even further. Specifically, what I really love about this Pokemon is that it works beautifully next to Hisuian Ursaluna, and that was kind of the big thing that was, oh, hey, like this might be something cute that people run. It is really, really, really good. It's that ground type that allows you to, have some great matchups into Miraidon. It, under Trick Room, is doing tons of damage into the Zamazentas. It's slower than the Kali Eyes, which it hits like a truck. I have also been running this next to Choice Specs Torkoal. It is the hardest of hard Trick Rooms, right?
Yeah.
But, you put these really tough pins on specific Pokemon that, a lot of them are running Terra Grass. There's a lot of Terra Grass in the format right now. So I think that it has supporting cast. It has great stats. It has great typing. Defensively, 100, 120, 120. That is really good. And yeah, I think that overall, just typing-wise, it has so many good matchups in this format. You struggle into Zamazenta, but that's why you have your supporting cast. But otherwise, across the board, it has some really solid matchups. It has some really good offensive output into a lot of the Pokemon that are here. Yeah, I don't know. I've been using it. I got it to, I think, just outside the top 500 in the best of 3 ladder. I believe in it. I'm a believer. I also haven't played in a fat minute, so this thing could be trash now. But
you were. I mean, we've all been busy the past few weeks, but you were pushing. It's this is a good Pokemon. I'm there. I love Dialga. It's overall, it's one of my favorite restricted. It's the Pokemon I use to get my best tournament result in. Dialga, not the origin form.
Yeah,
and the origin form is the improved version. What's honestly nice about having the Adamant Crystal is the fact that you're getting these boosts to your damage output. In the flash, like your flash cannon and your Draco meteors are doing more damage, and it's also an item that is exclusive just to the Dialga. So you're not taking away an assault vest from your Rillaboom, or you're not taking a life orb away from a Pokemon like Chi-Yu if you want to do put like a life orb there. So that is also really cool. Its general move pool, it gets everything. You have fire type coverage, you have electric coverage, ice coverage, fighting coverage, ground, dragon, steel, like pretty much any move you need, it's going to have offensively. I think the only thing that it struggles with is that the immediate offense, it's a mix of, I think, the immediate offense compared to Pokemon like Miraidon, Terapagos, and like Miraidon, Terapagos, Kyogre, and Cali isn't as great. The matchup into the high horsepower on the high horsepower from your Calyrex Ice and of course the body press from Zamazenta isn't amazing. And similar to Zamazenta and Kali-I that we talked about, the Amoonguss matchup is abysmal.
Yeah, that's been the big tough part about it. You know, it's like you don't really want, like, I run Terra Fairy on it. You can, I think, put Terra Grass, and I run it with like multiple Amoonguss immunities for the most part. I had one mode of the team that was with Psy Spam with Het DD. Ursaluna is a good Amoonguss answer. The other mode of my team had Amoonguss on it. I do think that that's a tough matchup, but I wanted to say, okay, just in terms of your Terapagos comparison, okay,
Yeah.
the base 130 special attack on Terapagos with a choice specs is 195 with the multipliers. Dialga with the Adamant Crystals base special attack with its stab moves is actually 225 when you apply the multiplier.
Okay.
So
no, that is multipliers are important. So yeah,
like you don't have that strong spread move and you don't have that Terra Stellar boost at the beginning. But like the other thing that stinks about it is that Draco Meteor is a little bit of a drawback for it. I've actually been running Dragon Pulse as of late because with Draco Meteor you lose your spam ability over time. While Dragon Pulse you can sit on the field and spam, and not drop your special attack. It's like you have to balance what you want. If you want one big Draco Meteor and then a half power Dragon Pulse after that can miss, like you can run that. It was good for me for a while, and then I changed the Pulse, and I still really liked what I was getting out of it. Yeah. And also you can't knock off the Adamant Crystal, so it actually has not a bad Incineroar matchup either.
You can't trick it off either, and that's honestly one of the other reasons why the dogs are really good, specifically Zamazenta, is that it can't be knocked off, and people are using Goldango. Some people have been running Trick Goldango, and then like, you can't do the switcheroo with the shield, right? You're doing nothing with it. If you are going to run Goldango to try to beat the Zamazenta, in my opinion at least, nasty, just like run the classics. Nasty plot in front of it a couple times. Click Shadow Ball. Done. Easy. Super easy. The only way you lose to that if you're using Goldango is if like you're up against substitute Zamazenta, which I do think that, in my opinion, that's something that people should really test with, especially because the substitute is another way for you to beat the Amoonguss without having to commit to your Terra typing. So if you want to change your Terra to something else, having the substitute in order to sub in front of the Amoonguss and stop the Spore that way is a super interesting way for the Zamazenta.
Yeah.
I really didn't have any other interesting other mons to talk about. I think everything in the C tier is the way it should be. The only thing I'd like to talk about is we make a separate tier called Chance Hines, and we put Lugia there because Chance has been doing and he does well with Lugia. But if your name isn't Chance Hines, don't run Lugia. It's that simple.
I do see like reason to maybe boost it to C tier, but like he's the
only person to get the results.
Yeah, he's the only one. So
yeah, it's like in the grand scheme of things, you're running the. I mean, format. Like, if you want to talk about comparing Mons, if you're thinking of running the Calm Mind Terapagos, you can argue Calm Mind Lugia with its psychic typing and flying typing are better into the Zamazenta. And then you look at every other matchup and you say, no, that's bad.
That's just worse.
Awful.
Yeah.
Yep. Another Calyrex got a +1 from its Chilling Day because you ran a flying type into a format where 2 of the 3 best restricteds just, beat you.
Yeah, Terapagos is like, oh, you don't have Wide Guard in your Zamazenta? Okay, Terra Stellar, now I can hit you.
Yep, done. But yeah, that is, I think, our tier list, or at least our updated tier list. We have 6 A tier Mons, 3 B tiers, and 1 C. The changes we made were moving Miraidon and Zamazenta up to high A. Cali I think, stays in high A. Calyrex Shadow moving to... Actually, that's the other thing. Do you want to move Calyrex Shadow 5th or 6th?
I think it's fine there. I think it and Kyogre are kind of similar.
Yeah, and then, of course...
Maybe shift it below Kyogre, because Kyogre had a couple results.
Yeah, Kyogre's... Yeah, make a cut, buddy. It's like, you get a cut, we'll give you your cut. You're better than Kyogre privileges
We'll give it back to you, we promise.
And then, of course, we saw Koraidon drop to B tier, and Lunala fall out and become a C tier on.
Yep.
Everything else in C tier, I think, is solid. And
some of those things could probably drop to D, like the Reshiram Zekrom combo, the Palkias, but I think that they're viable enough to where they're not like complete trash at the same time.
Yeah, I think I think you could put these here, and it's like the Chance Hines / YouTube, but not absolute garbage YouTube. Better than Mewtwo, but you really
redeemable qualities. We can call them that. The Dragon typing is a good defensive typing overall. So in general, if you're gunning for you're going to LA this weekend, you're going to NAIC in a few weeks. Again, big MSS for you to make that last push for your Worlds invite. We highly suggest here at Littleroot Lessons, even though we are the fun people, winning is also really fun. And if you're going to an event thinking I have to win, use one of these 9. Or Origin Form Dialga. I promise you won't be disappointed.
If you get a good result with Origin Form Dialga, tag us. Tweet at us, say, this is my team, we will play it on our channel, and we will just, full team report, do everything about it in our next episode.
Yes, sir.
Or the episode after you tell us about the Dialga.
Yeah, please.
With that being said, Jay, take us out of here.
With that, thank you all so much for watching episode number 220. Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe, all the fun YouTube stuff. Tell us why we were wrong or why Origin Form Dialga is great. That's the second time I've said that in an outro on this channel. Make sure you guys come and join the community Discord. Come hang out with us. Talk about all the different stuff that you've been using and what fun teams have been going around your MSSs and PCs. Would love to see what's going on in different parts of the country and the world. Follow the Twitter at LR Lessons. Tag us with your Origin Form Dialga teams, people. All right, do it. And check out the Discord and Patreon supporters links. Shout out to Papa Swish and Johnny Bravo Sr. for your support on Patreon. And shout out to Smeargle over on Discord. With that has been the episode, and we will see you all next week. Peace out.
Bye, everyone.